analyst for XNAT, and that means that I work with like platform administration, so like new users. I help them get acclimated. If there are new projects being submitted by researchers, I'm responsible for creating those projects. If there are updates to XNAT, to the platform, then I'm responsible for the kind of coordination of that. And then in addition to my role as an analyst, we work with developers who actually do the coding and stuff for the platform. We work with business stakeholders who have a stake in our platform. Those people are either the researchers or, maybe some of our executive leadership within IT in my institution. But as a result, I kind of have a gamut of types of meetings that I have throughout my day. I do work remotely. It's 8 to 5, Monday to Friday. Typically, we coordinate meetings on Teams or Zoom, and then some of those meetings are pertaining to our current sprints. Like we use a agile methodology for, our implementations, if you will. We have a series of tasks, and every 2 weeks we have like a to-do column, and then in progress, and then complete, and then that way we can track all of our tasks for our entire group across, a 2-week sprints. We have meetings where we discuss that. We have meetings with the researchers talking about the new projects they want to bring in. We will have meetings amongst ourselves, like myself and my IT peers, and we will plan for any system upgrades, that kind of thing. And then I have a couple of other meetings that are also just pertaining to like imaging at the institution as a whole. But yeah, those are the kind of meetings that I see on a day-to-day basis.
So you mentioned XStats. Is that a software students can learn now, or is that
so the platform that I work with, it's XNAT, it's XNAT, and it actually stands for Extensible Neuroimaging Archive Toolkit, which is fancy words for like taking pictures of the brain.
Mhm.
This started as a public software at Washington University in St. Louis. So it is free and available for any institution to use. As far as training at the collegiate level goes, I'm not aware of any like program that really exists.
Mhm.
When I was brought into this role, they understood that I had no experience with XNAT, but because this platform is relatively new, it's only been around for maybe 3 or 4 years. There is not necessarily like training or any like standard onboarding process for that. I was actually the first individual that they brought on my team for to work with XNAT specifically. So I've kind of learned with it as it's grown. If someone were interested in pursuing a career in this specific area, like the hospital imaging, it would be nice to have maybe some medical background or knowledge, but it's not necessary. I've had coworkers who they come from other backgrounds, and they're able to, work or to be an analyst for something they don't have experience with. And again, my role as an analyst is kind of one facet of, there are many different opportunities in the healthcare IT space, like, there's cybersecurity, and there are people, I work with research, there are people who work with the clinical applications, like Epic is the software they use to keep track of all the patient information. Then, there's many opportunities, and I think one thing that really helps me is having an internship that I had immediately after graduating from UHD. This internship took place at MD Anderson, and I was able to work in the Department of Shared Services, where I worked with their project management portfolio. And so that kind of exposed me to, one, the kind of meetings that I would have in my full-time position, and two, showed me the kind of jobs that were out there that were within the institution. I got to see people doing different jobs that I had never seen before, was not aware of, but being able to be around them and see what they do, that was really insightful for me. It helps me find an area of healthcare IT that I really like.
Awesome. I have a few follow-up questions to you talked about the different pathways to be in IT in the healthcare space. What are some degrees that, may not be medical field related, but will still allow you to get into the IT space?
Yeah, of course. So my degree was in management information systems, it was a business degree. And I picked that specific degree because I wanted to learn some of the business skills associated with, working in a business. And I wanted to also have some background in information systems and technology and computers. So that's the route that I took. I have a business degree. Now, you could also, obviously, there's computer science if you're more into being a developer or a coder. There is they have other roles, like I'm a application system analyst. They have business system analysts. Those individuals perform a similar job to mine that isn't necessarily IT, but they're also like supporting these endeavors that we have in the IT department. And they have business degrees typically, either just general BBA or maybe I don't know, finance or probably wouldn't be the most relevant in my area, but there are obviously other opportunities in a hospital outside of healthcare that business degree would be relevant. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe we should start from the beginning. You mentioned you got an internship which led you into your full-time career. Can you share your educational background with us of who you are and what inspired you to go into a career of IT in the healthcare field?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, my name is Mark and I'm a graduate of UHD. I graduated in summer of 21, I think. Yeah, sounds about right. So I was in the ATA as well. And while I was on campus, I was pursuing my degree in MIS, and I worked on campus in the business building computer lab. So I was a student worker while I was here. And then at the conclusion of the spring semester of my senior year, I was looking for internship opportunities. And I noticed that MD Anderson offered some, which is where I work now and where I had the internship. They had what were called student extern roles. They were all in the healthcare, in the IT fields, but they had different little areas in IT that they focused on. And mine ended up being focused on like the project management aspect of things. And so that was a summer-long engagement. I was working remotely as an extern about 20 hours a week. And then I was completing my final 2 or 3 classes needed for graduation. So the internship was only scheduled to last through the end of the summer, at which point I graduated. And they said, okay, well, you're no longer a student extern, but we can retain you as like a part-time worker while I pursue a full-time position. And they knew that I was pursuing a full-time position at their hospital, but also elsewhere. So I applied for jobs in that fall immediately after I graduated. And in the first month or two, I had a couple of interviews, but I did not receive any full-time job offers. And in the interim, I wanted to continue my education while I was searching for a job. So I ended up getting what is called a graduate certificate, and it was offered by UT Health here in Houston. And it was a graduate certificate in applied biomedical informatics, which it is a master's level program, but it only requires that you complete 5 courses. And upon completing these 5 courses, you're granted the graduate certificate. And so I pursued the certificate so that I could be continuing my education and be a more viable candidate for, for some of these positions. I don't think that it necessarily helps me to get the position that I ended up with, but I think that I did learn some skills in those classes that I use in my job today. The biomedical informatics degree is pretty much like doing data analysis on health-related subjects. So in my case, because we are dealing with patient population, it was, it makes sense. I also took a data visualization course that also taught me a lot that I that I use now, like in my daily job.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I remember us talking about the biomedics informatics certificate when we last connected. Um, uh, what coding outside of, I'm not, XStat, I'm gonna get that
Yeah.
acronym, XStat, do you have to learn for your role?
So that's one reason that I really like my role as an analyst, because even though I like computers, I don't necessarily like programming or developing or anything like that. I have some very like basic Java skills, but I don't know anything about like Python or C++ or any of these other programming languages. But that's kind of why my role is so nice, because all I have to do is, you know, make sure that the functions and features of the XNAP platform are functioning properly at the institution. So say there's a change that needs to be made, our team will approach a developer at our institution and say, okay, code this, make this change. And then they'll implement the change, and then myself and my coworkers, we just test the change that they made and make sure it works. So, we're not the ones actually coding. That was one thing I thought was really neat, is to know that there are positions in IT that, you're not required to be some, coding expert or, math or science heavy individual to be involved in.
It does sound very nice to be the quality assurance of a product. Absolutely. I'm going to just direct it to our audience. If you all have any questions, please drop them in the chat. Please provide commentary if you want to know something, or if there's a resource that resonated with you, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. And we'll get to any of the questions that are in the chat if there's any. If not, we will continue to keep rolling. I don't see any questions. Oh, what's up?
Sorry, I accidentally hit the applause. I meant to raise my hand. I actually have a couple of questions that I think might be useful for some of the students who might be a little bit too shy to ask questions right now. First of all, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us and provide this information and feedback. It's also great to have former ATA members who are employed and out there in the real world, as we say, coming back and letting us know what's going on. One of the questions that I have for you is, what is the trajectory for growth in your field look like? Like, what does that look like for, I guess, an entry-level person who wants to, quote unquote, climb the corporate ladder, right? What does that look like in your field, if you could share that with us?
Yeah, of course. It's a very good question, and it's something that I wanted to discuss as well. That it kind of depends on your career goals, but as a result, where you start in the IT fields, it doesn't really matter. I mean, you could start out as like a cybersecurity analyst or like an application analyst like myself, or even a developer. But then as you develop skills and become more familiar with whatever your area of specialty is, you have opportunity to become a manager over a small group, or as you continue to climb up the ladder, you would become manager, and then they have associate director, executive director. Then you have CIO, or the chief information officer. That's one of the C-suite executives that would be responsible for all of the IT assets or IT people in an institution. And then at our institution, we have another level of leadership above that. He's the chief technology and data officer. This person is a physician, but also has backgrounds in like clinical research. And then above that is the president of the institution. So in order, you can definitely move laterally as well. And then as you find an area that you really like, then, you can potentially progress. In my case, I'm kind of fortunate that I was brought on to work with XNAT as it was being deployed or developed at MD Anderson. And as a result, I get to grow with the platform. I have a say in, what we do and the direction we head. And then as a result, as the project expands, I could potentially become a manager or, work with others and kind of train them, teach them, that sort of thing. So, the potential definitely exists, and it really just kind of depends on where you want to go. I would also suggest UH Clear Lake. They have a Masters of Healthcare Administration program that I think it's a 4-year program, but it is not offered in many other schools. And so if you wanted to potentially become a manager in a healthcare setting, it's an MHA, Masters of Healthcare Administration, as opposed to MBA, which, Masters of Business Administration. The two are very similar, but one is probably, healthcare obviously is more suited towards healthcare. But yeah, so there's definitely opportunity for career growth, at least at my institution, from what I've seen.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Because I know that a lot of times, especially with as the generations get younger and as time moves on, that's usually where people's mind is at, right? Like, how do I move and maneuver throughout things? I know that's one of my career interests. And I know that for the most part, a lot of our students who are looking to go into higher, or not go into higher education, but get education in higher education institutions, that's the end goal, is to eventually end up somewhere in that C-suite, right?
If I may, another good point is that you can, get an undergraduate degree, have an entry-level job, and then work for a while. And then as you progress, you don't necessarily even need the master's degree, but, maybe come later, you want to progress and they say, oh, you should pursue this. Some institutions, such as, MD Anderson, will reimburse you for some of the tuition if you take, educational courses. So it might be worth waiting on getting a master's degree until later you can determine if it's something that you should really pursue or if you really even need.
Right. Okay. And yeah, I know a lot of different lines of work do that as well. Ashley, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask one more question before we continue, if that's okay.
Do your thing.
The second question that I have for you is, I heard you say something that I know probably perked up the ears of a couple of the students in there. It definitely got me as well. Is that you work fully remotely? Is that correct?
I do. So I work fully remotely Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. In my particular role, I don't really have any on-call obligations. The structure of my group is such that, well, I work specifically with XNet. I'm part of the greater imaging group at MD Anderson. Some of the other individuals in the imaging group are responsible for being on call because maybe their platform or whatever they do is more pertinent to, clinical, like patients in the hospital. XNet is really only pertaining right now to research, which means that, we don't need an on-call person. If something happens to XNet, it's not going to affect patient care. So just kind of like a caveat that there could be some in-person component, just depending on what exactly it is that you do in your IT role. But yeah, I've worked completely remotely as both an intern and now full-time. I like it. It gives me a lot of flexibility to, don't have to commute. The fridge is close by at home. You don't have to, pay for parking. It's very convenient. There is a part of me that thinks, it would be nice to have some in-person components, because in my meetings every day, it's myself and my coworkers who I see every day. If I were to physically go into a hospital and walk up and down hallways, I would be meeting other people who might work in a completely different departments. So you do kind of lack some of that social, socialization, but there are certainly ways that you can offset that limit. If you, participate in events such as these, or if you go to, like, we have monthly gatherings for, in-person gatherings for our teammates, so we can socialize in person. We have like a peer mentoring program. It's a one-on-one career mentor at the institution. You can be either a mentor or a mentee, and you can pick someone from a completely different area of the hospital, but they can teach you skills that, they could be directly applicable to your job, but they could also just be, greater career building skills and tools. And, they could teach you how to be a better networker, or teach you how to, be a better critical thinker or problem solver, that sort of thing. So definitely opportunities for, working remotely. Yeah, it's nice, but if you want to see other people, there are ways that you can, interact with others.
Absolutely. And Mark, I will be running up there as once this session is wrapped up, to see you and hug you and just say hello again. Because it's been a minute, and it's good to see, like Deontay mentioned, it's good to see ATA members come home and welcome us with their knowledge and their energy and their presence. So I hope you got that today, here and elsewhere, as you're going about your day. I did have a question regarding the skills. You mentioned that with the mentorship component, you can learn new skills in a different office or department. But what new skills have you learned in your role? Whether it's been from your externship to being full-time now, or from full-time forward, what new skills have you learned?
So I don't know. Honestly, there's just been so many, I think part of it is having my first full-time position, but, some skills that I found are immediately important are, being able to manage your time, not necessarily by, having a calendar is certainly helpful in seeing when things are taking place, but, knowing what tasks you have on your plate and being able to say, okay, I'm going to set this time aside to complete this, and then this other task is going to take me this amount of time. That way you can kind of stay on top of things, because as people continue to, ask work of you, you can't, you need to be able to kind of balance and determine what your strategy will be for finishing everything. If you don't have one, all these things just start piling up, and it can be very difficult to, to catch up. But I must say, I don't feel like I have an excess amount of work or any sort of burnout. It could just be because I'm at an entry level position and I'm not some executive making, bigger decisions. But yeah, I think time management is something that I've kind of developed. And then, being not only a good problem solver, but being a good question asker, being able to determine what questions to ask when you're in meetings, or, clarifying questions. If someone says, I want this, then you need to be able to come back with, okay, these are the things we need to make that work. What are your thoughts on these other 5 things? Asking questions makes for an easier time when you're trying to solve the problem.
You provided a whole success coaching session in that one response right there. Thank you. And then you see how it continues to translate regardless of if you're a student, if you're full-time, if you're internshipping. These are all our transferable skills. So thank you. You mentioned in the beginning of your statement that this is your first full-time job. What are 3 things that have been most important to you thus far in this role?
Full-time salary, full-time benefits. I don't know. I would say I like my my teammates. We have many different backgrounds, both educational and then just personal. And as a result, it can provide some pretty unique and varied insight to a lot of different topics or issues that we face. So I think I'm thankful for my teammates. And then also what was your question again? Things that
have been most important? Yeah, I think
Most
you mentioned. Mhm.
Okay, yeah, so my teammates have been important to me. I would say my work environments, this is more maybe a personal thing, but because I work remotely, they provide me with an institutional laptop, but then I, just because I like computers and stuff, have my own screen and monitors and keyboard, all that kind of stuff. So that has been important to me because that's like my workspace, and I know that when I'm there, it's time for work. I think that if I didn't have that space at home, it would be a lot harder for me to work remotely. Like my desk is big, I have space to write and stuff, um, and I would say third thing that's been most important to me, it kind of does go back to communication skills, I would say, like learning, not only how to communicate with others, but different people have different methods of communication, and, trying to have some empathy and understands, their point of view, where they're coming from, and being able to resolve, conflicts peacefully, and, finding some common grounds, because it can get kind of heated in some meetings, people will go back and forth, but, understanding that we're all kind of on the same team and we're trying to accomplish the same shared goal, kind of can bring us back to, to where we should be. But yeah.
Those are great, great and things that matter, great things that matter to you. With the work environment, I know you mentioned when you have your space, and then when you're in that space, it's time to work. But outside of that, working remotely, how do you balance work and life with working remote and having a family and everything?
So I work 8 to 5, and at 5 o'clock every day, I'm fortunate I'm able to like turn my computer off. I know some people, if they have other things, they'll work past 5 o'clock, but I don't really do that. I do have my work email on my personal cell phone, but which is kind of convenient because if I need to respond to an email, I can. But at the same time, I can just ignore it and know that it'll be on my laptop the next day. So it's also important to, take breaks throughout the day. Some days I'll only have 2 or 3 meetings, but other days, it could be a marathon, you wake up at 8 and then you look up and it's 2 o'clock. And it can be hard on your body physically to just sit in a chair for, X amount of hours. It's important to, get up, walk around, maybe go outside. Yeah, and then I think that the balance thing too, it also depends on your environment. Admittedly, when I started this job, I lived in an apartment by myself, and then I've since gotten married, and then my wife has moved in, and then, she has a dog and a cat, and then she's expecting. So it's gradually kind of grown. And I think that, if you have a lot of distractions at home, it can certainly be difficult maybe, but for me, it all kind of comes back to having, my little desk space, my area, that, that helps a lot with kind of separating. That's my workspace, and then everywhere else at home is, that's home, that's, everything else.
Awesome. What are your dog and your cat's name?
So our dog's name is Panda, and then our cat's name is Spidey, like his Spidey senses. He's like 4 months. He's really playful.
Okay. It must be nice to have like the pet there and just comforting you and everything like that. We have a question from the audience. Deontay, what's up?
All right. Random question. I think you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but I just wanted to ask you, what advice do you have for those that are trying to find a job immediately after graduation?
Yeah, that's probably the most important question. I would, the question that I would be asking when I would participate in these is as an observer, I would say, apply to as many internships or those kind of positions that you can. Obviously, if it's paid, even better. Unfortunately, if you can't find one, maybe you can consider unpaid internships. I know that they aren't the greatest, but at least they provide you some exposure and something to put on your resume. When you're applying, don't be discouraged. The position that I have now, I applied to maybe like 8 other analyst positions at the same hospital. And I made it through to like final round of interviews like 3 times. And then, those first 3 times I didn't get the job. And, it would be easy to get discouraged, but at the same time, it's all about perspective. I try to take it as a learning experience. In each one of those interviews, I learned something more about, how to be a good interviewer and, how to speak, the kind of questions they ask. So yeah, don't get discouraged. And then other pieces of advice, it can be hard to know exactly what you want to do in terms of a career or what that might look like, but it's important that, your own personal values align with, whatever institution or company or wherever you work. It's easy for me because I know that working at a cancer hospital, we're trying to help treat people with cancer, and, that makes me feel good. Other companies, maybe they have values that or that you personally like. It makes it a lot easier to kind of, buy into what they're doing. And then also when you're interviewing, I think it can kind of show, if you personally have some connection to the organization's goal or mission, then, that's really good.
Thank you for that. I know one of the things that I usually tell students a lot when it comes down to like the job hunt is that it's kind of like this is really cliche, but it's kind of like baseball. Like baseball is a game of failure, right? Like a Hall of Famer on average is going to hit the ball only 3 times every 10 times that they try, right? That is a that's a higher average than getting jobs as far as applying. Like I've told students before that before my first full-time job, I probably applied for nearly 100 different jobs. And I got denied, obviously, rejected far more often than I was given the job, right? So what would be your, I guess a follow-up question would be like, how did you handle those rejections, right? And how did you not get discouraged?
That's a good question. So there's one rejection in particular that, kind of sticks in my mind because, as I mentioned, I was an extern in the department of what is called shared services, the project management office. And they let me know that there was an associate position that was being listed, and they heavily suggested that I apply. It would be with the team that I'm already working for, and it would be full-time. And, I applied through, got through the first round of interviews. I was like a finalist. It was me and another person, and they picked someone else. And then, come Monday, I have to go back to work and then talk to these people, knowing that they picked someone else. And it was kind of weird, but, trying to think back to how I felt at the time, maybe a little sad or discouraged, but I knew that they weren't doing it to slight me or anything like that. They hired me in the first place. They were going to continue to be working with me. They truly just thought someone else was a better candidate for this position. And, bearing that in mind kind of gave me some peace of mind. And then later knowing that the role that I have now is doing something very different than what I would have been doing in that role, and seeing, what that other role is now, I don't think I would be as happy as, where I'm at. So yeah, just knowing that something else could always be right around the corner, and that, I guess, if you're rejected, it's nothing personal against you, really. You just have to imagine that the person who is interviewing you is looking out for what they have the best interest of their company or their business in mind. And if you're not a right fit, then that's just the way it is. But, hey, that doesn't mean don't apply again in the future. Maybe you'll be a better fit in the future.
Absolutely. That's great advice and great question, Deontay. All right, so I have about 2 to 3 more questions for you as we are coming up to the last few minutes of our conversation. I did want to talk to you about what are some resources students can research on their own, get involved with on campus and the professional level that would help them prepare for a career in IT, a career in healthcare, and the MIS field. Major, excuse me.
So, I was a member of an organization on campus called Association of IT Professionals, AITP. I'm not sure if it still exists, but they would have different industry professionals come through and talk about their job in IT. It was pretty insightful. I don't know if there's an organization at U of H main campus called MISSO, which stands for MIS Student Organization. I don't know if there's like, if they would allow you or UH downtown students to join or how that works, but I know they're very active. If you are involved in MIS, this is just like IT broader, I guess. There's probably other computer science organizations at UHD, but I'm not too aware. And then as far as like professional organizations, I don't know if there are student options available for these, but one is called AHIA, the American Healthcare Informatics Association, I think. That one's more of like a healthcare centric organization. I think there's some others that I'm forgetting, but yeah, there's certainly a wealth of organizations out there. If you are in the business school, I know that they have a lot of events and stuff that are sponsored by the School of Business. You can check that out. If you're not a business student, then there's the Career Center as well for other majors. If you're more like computer science focused. But yeah, those are some good resources, some places to look.
Absolutely, you gave a plethora of them. And to the MISSO student organization, if it does not exist here at UHD, you can always create it, always start a chapter, an org here on campus. So thank you for plugging those resources. I dropped them in the chat for our attendees. Feel free to explore them. If they do have the student option, it's typically a more affordable cost, cheaper than the professional option as well. And it does give you, typically they do give you access to the same type of benefits that the professionals do at a more affordable cost for students. My last question for you, Mark, is what has been your most proudest accomplishment thus far in your journey?
That's a good question. There's one memory that sticks out in my mind that maybe isn't the most special anymore, but I think certainly interesting. I enjoyed. I was testing a new release of XNAT with my coworkers, and I was still very new at the time. I had only been working about 2 weeks, and the issue, or I guess, they wanted to be able to restrict who's able to download or who is able to download information. As an example, I'm a researcher and I make a project, and then I have all these collaborators who are also in the project. We're able to configure, okay, only the collaborators can see the information, the collaborators cannot download the information. So we tested that and made sure that, okay, the collaborators in fact cannot download, that is working as expected. But then I noticed, these are medical images like CAT scan, MRI. There's a button on the screen where collaborators could view images. And if you were to click on that, and then it would open the picture and you could see it. If you were to modify the URL, that it would allow you to download the data that they in fact did not want you to download. So I kind of found some way to circumvent, I guess, the feature or the security that they had implemented. And then the next day, the executive director, I guess, had found out that there was some loophole, and he congratulated me, or thanked me, I guess, for pointing it out rather, but he was like, wow, how did you know to try all this stuff? But that felt pretty good being recognized.
Absolutely. That's a great feeling. A great feeling. And congratulations, on figuring that out and just being 2 weeks into the game and learning XStat really fast and everything like that. That's pretty, I'm thinking about that, like how just it doesn't matter the experience that you do have, that problem solving looks different for everyone, and you took that opportunity to explore and to discover something new, and you brought it to the work that y'all do, and that's an asset.
Yeah, exactly. It's not, the quantity or like age of experience you have, but your experiences might be very different from those of someone else, and that inherently can be, beneficial to you in the workplace.
Absolutely. Well, Mark, those are all the questions that I have for you. Audience members, Deontay, do you have any questions for Mark before we wrap up?
I don't have any. I'm looking through the chat and I don't see any other ones. So I will just say thank you for the insight for sure. And like I said, it's always great to hear from former ATA folks and hearing about what it's like out there in the real world as far as working and kind of what to expect, because I know a lot of folks just we go into it, for lack of a better term, blind, without really knowing the grind of one, getting the job, and then also the grind of, all right, now when I'm in the job, what does that look like? How do I grow and stuff like that? So thank you.
Of course, I think that, in my experience, it's like, the two phases are like before you have the first job and then after. Once you get it, once you have that first full-time role, it's much easier to build experience and then transition to other positions. But as an entry-level individual with no experience, that's where the struggle really is, because they want experience, but you don't have it because you just graduated, and it's, this cycle. So that's kind of how the internships help, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy to, be able to come here and speak and kind of help, share my story and my path to getting this job. And
Mark, how can we stay in contact with you?
yeah, so you can email me. I can share my email address in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can email, and then I also have LinkedIn. Here, let me put that to you. So yeah, I think for LinkedIn, you should be able to find me if you search for my full name.
Well, Mark, thank you again for your time, for your expertise, for your journey. Thank you for sharing it with us here at ATA, with new faces, new students. For all of our attendees, thank you all for your time and connecting and learning in this space. Please feel free to follow up with Mark if you have any questions, if you're looking to get more insight on the MIS field, the study of MIS, transitioning into your career field with IT and healthcare, where he sought out the resources to find that internship. Please feel free to reach out to Mark. He's a wonderful resource. And don't forget to fill out your CLC connection survey that will be coming to you in 3 minutes. And we hope to see you tomorrow at the workshop, and then on Thursday at the Fuel Up for Finals, and then on Friday for our program meeting, and then on Thursday for the end of the semester celebration. Yes, so you get to spend a lot of time with us. But if not, please take good care of yourselves. See you soon. And Mark, stay right there. I'm coming up right now.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you. you.